welcome weary travelers to another episode of What We've Been Watching here on the What Doesn't Kill Us channel that's part of the Fight or Flight Network. Today we have with us you guys. Introduce yourself.
I'm
Introductions.
I'm Noel.
Hi, I'm Kenda.
So this is the little short video we talk about things that we've been watching that maybe we don't want to go into deep detail about like we do with our What Doesn't Kill Us podcast, but we still want to bring them to your attention and say like, hey, this was a good or horrible movie. So who wants to start off? Noel, you want to go first?
Okay, I was just IMDbing because I just want to get the information right. So there were two films I wanted to mention specifically because they are sort of high. They're from the '70s. They're of course, but they're big budget with big actors. Horror movies at a time when I think horror movies were post The Exorcist. People were making bigger budget, or the studios were making larger budget horror movies with like really pretty top notch actors, or and taking them more seriously. That it had sort of gone, horror had come out of a ghetto, but it didn't last very long. But because they probably stopped making money, but I don't know what the full story is. Anyway, one of them has a lot of people have talked about, and there was just a projection booth podcast, which is a really good podcast. They did a whole thing about the Changeling. I don't know if you guys have seen it, with George C. Scott. Hang on, it's from 1980, and
No,
it
I've seen the Angelina Jolie one.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
oh
That's
no,
the
this,
one.
I'm not sure if the Angel no, right, yeah, that's right. The Angelina Jolie one is like a thriller, right, of some kind, or crime.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, it's like a
About a missing
drama.
child.
this is full on horror. The plot, according to IMDb, a man staying at a secluded historical mansion finds himself being haunted by the presence of a specter. That's pretty lame. But that's basically what happens. But um, uh, this is a high budget, high level in terms of the acting, in terms of the cinematography, in terms of, apparently I found out from this podcast that they built this house from scratch, which is incredible when you see it. Um, it's famous for the cover of the DVD, of the VHS. It's the old fashioned wheelchair
Yeah.
shadow of it, or like at the top of the stairs, because that's one of the main images from the film, and a lot of people know it from that. And I remember, Monica, you talking about changelings in the past, and I never fully understood what you were talking about. But now that I've seen the movie, I mean, I could have just looked it up in the dictionary, but now that I've seen the movie, I like have a much better sense of what the whole changeling thing is. This is set in the present. George C. Scott, I don't know if you guys know him, but he's a major heavyweight actor. He's most famous for playing Patton, General Patton, but he's considered one of the greats. He's actually in The Exorcist 3, and he's really good in that. If Let me see, what are some of the Petulia, Patton, The Bible in the beginning. He played Abraham. What's he famous for? Anatomy of a Murder, and then Doctor Strangelove.
Doctor Strangelove, yeah.
Yeah.
Just looks,
So he's like a serious heavyweight actor, and to put that kind of an actor in a straight up ghost story where he's living in a house that's being haunted and he has to deal with this haunting, it's like not something, it almost doesn't compute because you're not used to seeing that kind of level of he's famous for being very a lot, playing military type characters or very intense. And here he keeps it really restrained. And then his wife, George C. Scott's wife, Trish Vanderveer, is in the film, not as his wife. He lost his wife and his child before the film. Oh no! Unfortunately, at the beginning, you get to see his wife and child get hit by a truck. It's horrifying. But because he's recently lost his family, that's one of the reasons why the ghost of the changeling comes to connect with him in this big house. But his wife is fantastic. Trish Van Devere in the film, and she's another heavyish hitter actress. And there's a scene where the haunted, old school, like 19th century wheelchair is chasing her. It's a famous scene. It's really, and that's where the image of the wheelchair at the top of the stairs. I know it sounds ridiculous.
No. I'm thinking that sounds like my worst nightmare.
Oh yeah. Well,
I'm just sitting here going, oh my god, nope, I'm out.
well, it's like they do it just as I described it. This wheelchair, this old wheelchair in the attic, chases this grown woman around. Normally, this would be laughable. I mean, it could be a personal nightmare, but if it was done badly, it would be like, this is preposterous.
Yeah, it just campy.
Campy, right.
Well, there's something to I really enjoy scares that are stuff like a chair chasing you as opposed to the actual ghost, because there's the element of the unknown. When it's an object, you don't know what's pushing it.
Yeah,
Whereas if
yeah.
you see the ghost, you're like, okay, this is the ghost. I know what it is.
Right.
It's not as scary as when you're like, I have no idea why this chair is going after me.
Right. And that
Stuff gets me so much more.
I think this will really get to you, because I agree with you, but if it's done badly, it's funny.
Yeah.
But Trish Van Devere, again, George C. Scott's wife in real life, but she plays kind of a romantic. She's the one that works for the Preservation Society that gets in this house. He's a famous composer that's coming to the local college to teach. Anyway, her reactions, because she's such a serious actor and so experienced, into her 40s. It's the first time that I can think of in a horror movie or in a ghost movie where I've actually seen somebody really respond to something supernatural happening, and how an adult that would respond. I don't know why, but there's something about the way that it's done. It's almost a total realism. It's a ghost story that's one of the most realistic I've ever seen, mostly because of the way the actors are responding to what's going on. Her whole world, even though she's getting chased, it's really, the scene is about her whole world is rocked if everything you believe crumbles. Now, in horror movies and in ghost stories, we see that regularly, but I've never seen it handled so, just by the way that she's responding to getting chased, and by the end of the chase, you can tell that she's a different person, because her whole sense of how the world works has been radically shifted. And it has to do with the directing, it has to do with her acting, it has to do with all the pieces put together that make it that level of effectiveness, that is not funny, and that we can actually see the character change from before getting chased to after getting chased just by her performance. I don't even think she says anything. So it's like extraordinary. I have to say I've never seen anything quite like it. So I highly recommend it, and I think it was a short time in American cinema when horror movies, ghost stories, were being treated like serious properties. That's pretty much what I'm saying.
Well, no, you've sold me. I've thrown it on my list of
Oh,
movies
you're
to
gonna
watch.
love it, Monica. This is gonna hit all the right notes for you. I just know it.
I was gonna say, you were talking about the way the actress sells it. There's one movie that I agree, it's a horrible movie, but the actress in it, because I genuinely feel her performance is how a normal person would react in this situation, which a lot of people hated her for it, because she completely
Oh.
and
She completely what?
I'm trying to find. I can't remember the name.
We just
of the movie.
missed you. You froze
Yeah,
on.
you froze for a
You
second.
completely
of course.
flipped out.
She flipped out completely and totally in this situation, and I'm like, yeah, that's legit. Like,
Yeah, that's how
Like,
it
that makes
happened.
and I'm trying to find. I can't remember the name of the movie, but I remember it's Jennifer Carpenter, and I'm trying to go through.
Oh
there it
boy,
is.
people love to hate Jennifer Carpenter. That poor
I know.
girl.
I like her.
I like her too, but she's really.
Quarantine is the movie, and I agree, it is an awful movie.
Oh,
It's-
it
we were
is?
Just speaking of found footage movies, that's one of the ones that I feel like is not very successful. But her performance in that just completely sold me for her,
Interesting.
because she panics just the right way.
Yeah.
She doesn't panic just the right way. Like, she grasps the right situations and then freaks out on the other ones. And I'm like, this is legit. Like, you see horror movies where the person either freaks out and dies, or they like stand up and become hardcore because that's what you have to do. And
Right.
I'm like, that's nice, but that's a fantasy.
Yeah.
Most people would be screaming. And there's like this one scene where she's walking down a hall and she's like this the whole time, and I'm like, yeah, that's legit.
Yeah, yeah.
You are
No,
scared. I feel you.
you
Like
can't
that.
help it. Oh, sorry, Kinda.
No, you're fine. It's kind of like whenever you feel that you can place yourself in that situation and you're like, yes, this is legitimately how I'd react. Like
Yeah.
go down the checklist.
Yeah.
It's like suddenly that's so much more real than some girl screaming over the top or like, oh, I'm just gonna, run into this dark room with a knife.
Yeah. With girls in horror films, you have either like scream and lose their top, or grab a knife or an
Basically
axe
lose
and
their
go
top.
crazy.
Yeah, it's just like
And
you either go
this
one way or
woman
the other.
she was kind of in between. Like, she was freaking out, but she still, like, picked up the axe and everything. But the axe was shaking like
Yeah.
crazy the whole time she was
I
doing
mean,
it.
Jennifer Carpenter's really good at that high
I love
intensity
her.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she
she's.
is.
I can totally imagine what you're describing.
Yeah.
But the thing I was going to say about George C. Scott, he reminds me of like, because he's like a man in his 50s and totally a real person. He yells back at the haunt. The house is being very aggressive and haunting him, and there's a great moment where he just yells out, "What do you want from me? What do you want me to do for you?" And it's like, yeah, that's how. We're not going to spend like half the film with him saying, "Oh, it's impossible," "Oh, blah blah blah," all of
Yeah.
that. Like, it's like he's
You
seeing
got
what's
a book
happening.
levitating right in front of you.
Yeah,
And you're like, oh, it's the wind.
he's seeing what's happening. Yeah, it's
You
like,
women and your superstitions.
yeah, there's none of that, and it's such a relief. But he's like, what do you want from, how am I, clearly, and of course because he's lost his family recently, he's more of a sensitive, he's a different person now since
Yeah.
that has happened. So I highly recommend it. And yeah, it's now being considered a kind of a classic. And it's too bad that Hollywood, I guess, is what you guys were talking about, big budget, large scale horror movies when we had our discussion about Crimson Peak and how those kind of movies just aren't made anymore.
Yeah.
And Crimson Peak's probably the closest of that level of production, I guess.
Yeah, people see it as a cheap thrill, and so they make it cheap.
Yeah.
It is interesting that that's the way that horror has gone because it seems to be doing this, like, public interest has always been there, but it's, I guess, people's tastes that are changing. Like, how do we get from we need to pour as much money as we can into something like you said in the 70s and 80s where these like shoestring budgets were rare and really became the gems, and now it's like we're all shoestring budget horror movies, but they're terrible, and the big budget ones seem to not, I guess people assume there's not enough interest to create them. Like,
That's supposedly what happens. My understanding is that there's not enough people to go on a large enough scale. I mean, the last time that happened was what, Silence of the Lambs or something like that? I don't know.
yeah, that's what it
I don't
seems.
know. But of course, the found footage thing has made it all like, it's like reality TV. It's like it's guaranteed to make money. So no matter how cheap it is, it's always going to make money. So that genre will probably never die because you can make a shoestring thing and people will go and they're just going to exploit that as far as they can. But The Exorcist changed everything, and but the effect of The Exorcist really lasted like maybe 10 years of and that was a fluke, I guess, the coming together. I mean, partly that was a big bestseller book before they made it a movie. I guess Rosemary's Baby would be another example.
Mhm.
I don't know. It's an interesting question. Really interesting questions about what's
Yeah.
so funny.
No, you mentioned Rosemary's Baby. I'm like, oh,
Well,
it's my movie.
I had more movies, but should we go around in a circle so we're not all? So I don't want to hog the. I don't want to be yammering for too long of a time without a break. So does somebody else want to give a movie?
Yeah, I guess we can.
We don't have to that way. I just like feel.
That's fine. I'll go next then. So I like to pick themes when I do stuff, and so my theme in this one is these aren't horror films unless you really think about them, and they're actually both psychological films. And when I say psychological, I mean they're about psychology.
Oh.
And one of them's called. I'm gonna do the one that I don't like as much first. It's called The Experiment. It's got oh, I just had it. Adrian Brody, Forrest Whitaker.
Mm.
Um,
Wow.
there's a bunch of other people, but those are the two big ones. It's about the Stanford prison experiment where
Wait a minute.
they.
This is not the film, The Stanford Prison Experiment, because
No, 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 no.
there's a new film, called that, where they
Real?
Oh, I didn't
reenact
even know
it.
there was a new
Oh
film.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The Stanford
Hmm.
Prison Experiment. They
No, this
reconstruct the
came
whole
out.
thing.
This came out 2001, I think,
Oh
or
wow.
2010. No, I was way off. 2010.
Yeah, but still.
Um, this is like, I mean, it's a retelling kind of, because
Yeah.
they're saying they put it in modern times, and they say it's like
Oh.
the first time, but it's really like, I remember we studied this in school, and it's really trippy to hear about this,
Yeah.
like how these are all completely normal people. If you don't know what the Stanford Prison Experiment is, um, they just found a whole bunch of people on the road and assigned each person a card, and your card said prisoner or warden.
Yeah, they were like
And
college students.
yeah, well,
Yeah. It
no, I
was,
mean, some of them were, but some of them were just people in the college town.
Hmm.
oh yeah.
Um,
Right.
they weren't all students.
Volunteers. Yeah.
Yeah, they were all just volunteers for this
Right.
experiment. And so once you got this card, it was completely like a lottery. It had absolutely nothing to do with you, yourself, your background, anything like that. And so then they basically, I don't remember if it was like, it was scheduled to do like a month, and I think it only lasted like a week or so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because it escalated so much, so
So
fast,
fast. Yeah.
to the point of like prison riots and beatings and everything. And
Stabbings
it
with like pencils.
yeah, making
Yeah.
shivs
So
and stuff like
horrifying.
that.
I don't mean to laugh.
And
It's just so horrifying.
no, it's so terrifying,
It's so
because
extreme.
because you see these things and you hear about these things in actual prison situations, and you're like, oh, well, these guys are convicts, so that's just in their nature. But these people weren't convicts. These people were just average Joes, but being put in that situation, I can't even explain it. Just
Well,
watch
it
the
makes you
movie,
realize that
search the actual
it isn't. Yeah.
experiment. It's a very dark look at how fragile the human psyche is, and how easy it is to break it and remold it to whatever you
Mm.
want it to be. And they weren't even trying to remold it. It's just what happened, and it's really scary to think about how dark we can become when given so little options, and when given the freedom to become
Freedom.
dark.
Yeah. So Whitaker, does he play like somebody?
He plays one of the wardens, and Adrian Brody is one of the prisoners.
Wow. So this is an older. I mean, they're making him older from the actual.
Yeah, well, that's interesting.
And I mean, does it go through the whole thing based on what happened, or does it take a different?
No, I mean, the ending is a little different, but in general, probably day for day, similar situations happen each day.
And you think they both do a good job?
Hmm.
Adrian
Oh
Brody
yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
Forrest
Like,
Whitaker.
okay, I'm kind of meh on Adrian Brody. I love Forrest Whitaker. And this role especially, like, he's very sad and depraved, and
Depraved.
yeah, like his character is the kind of the meek character, the sheepish, and he becomes one of the wardens,
Mm,
and the power like gets to him, and
Wow.
they show that really well.
mm.
And I don't know,
He
he
scares
nailed,
me, so I can totally imagine
yeah,
that.
every, like, as a sweet and like just, yeah, he starts off as like the sweetest, most gentle character in the world, and he just, every little
Whoop.
like smirk on his face and all that, like, he nails it.
Yeah, I can
Like,
imagine that actor.
I love it. But yeah,
Interesting.
it's not a horror film, but when you really think about
No,
it,
it's horrifying.
it is very
But
horrifying.
I wonder what the connect. I wonder how the experiment from 2010 compares with the Stanford Prison Experiment from 2015, where they did a more
I didn't even know they were
literal
really
reenactment.
excited to watch that.
I've been
Yeah.
avoiding watching it because it just seems like
It's dark.
it might be too. Yeah.
It's hard.
What?
We had to watch a lot of the original, like the actual original documentary
Oh, yeah.
footage
Oh
in school.
really?
Yeah.
And
There's footage of it?
Yep.
Yeah, they
Oh, I
filmed the
didn't
whole
even-
thing.
I didn't.
Yeah.
Oh
They
my
made
god!
like
I
a
didn't even know
documentary
that.
of it while it was going on, and you can see the doctor who wanted to do the project in the first place, and like why he proposed it, and like he's trying to write like a little thesis about it. So it's like it's all there, and it's all grainy footage because
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what, the mid 70s when this was happening.
Yeah, it was like the 70s.
But it's trippy, like it's something else.
It's really scary to watch.
Oh, I didn't even know that there was so much actual documentation of the actual thing. That's no wonder it's upset so many people.
I'm curious too, like I think because you know with a lot of psychological experiments they'll like, oh, we'll pay you $5 for this like depression experiment. Like I wonder how it was marketed to them. Like it's a social experiment, we'll pay
Yeah.
like $10, come
Yeah, I don't
do
know.
it. And then by the time they got out, like there was interviews with people like 20 years later who were involved in it, and they were still messed up and
Yeah.
still
Oh, really?
talking about it for this documentary. Like, it was pretty nuts.
It was 1971, yeah. And the film from 2015 has like, it got good reviews.
Oh,
Um,
that's
Gotta look
surprising.
that up.
But it's supposed to be really brutal.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the world needs more of that.
Well, yeah, telling us what we know, but we don't always like to be
Watch it.
reminded of it or watch it. Yeah.
I
So,
think-
Ken, did you want to go?
Sure.
Is that okay, Monica, or is there more
Yeah,
you
yeah.
wanted to
No. Well, I
say?
have another one, but we'll go around.
Yeah.
Second round. So I'm going with Monica's current theme of
Yay!
Yay! Of what is not necessarily strictly horror or would be considered in the horror genre, but there's implications in it that can be frightening or
Andy?
When you really
I'm
think
sorry.
about it.
no, sorry, kind
Maybe.
of like haunting, like it sticks with you afterwards and you don't know why. So I went with Mirror Mask. It's a 2005 film directed by Jim Henson. It was a UK film, and Neil Gaiman was the one who wrote it. And I love
love
anything
this.
Neil Gaiman, so
I love everything Neil Gaiman, everything Jim Henson, and this movie was like my dream come true.
God, why have I never heard of this thing?
And it's even got Rob Brydon in it, and I adore
Yes.
that man. Absolutely adore him.
it basically starts out a girl. It already starts out on a surreal footnote, like because the main protagonist is a girl who her family is running a circus and she's tired of being in a circus and wants like a real life. She wants to go to school. She wants to have friends. And you're like, okay, this is weird. Like I'm already not sure I'm going to be able to relate. And she mainly escapes through her drawings, and she does some really interesting thick ink drawings and sketches to break away from her reality. And I think her mom gets terminally ill with something, and you know, family life just starts going downhill more. And I don't exactly remember how. It's been a while. She falls into the world of her own drawings.
That
And
sounds like Gaiman.
yeah, it's a lot like Coraline in that she gets trapped in this other world, but when she sees through back to like her life, even though she can't get to it, there's something else that's taken her place and is walking around, acting like her, talking like her, you know, being terrible to her mother in the hospital, and there's nothing she can do. So she has to find her way out through this world that she's created to get back to where she never wanted to be in the first place, like ironically.
Huh.
And
So
Now,
accept
this
your
is live
fate.
action, right? Or
it is it's weird.
Partially 2D, partially 3D.
huh?
Yeah, it's like a
Oh.
smash of
Sick.
CGI and like
But there is a lot of like 2D animation within it with her drawings and
Yeah.
stuff like that. It's gorgeous.
So it needs to be seen with in a 3D situation, or should is
No,
that
no.
no, it's
You would probably throw up.
Oh, because it's too intense.
that it's just it's a lot of weird jarring imagery in that I don't even know how to explain, like kind of like claymation, but it's definitely not that. It's like that mixed in with actual live action people.
Mm.
And
I love
it's
the cats, like the
Yeah.
Sphinx cats, yeah, with the faces.
like if you've seen early graphics on video games, you know, for like PlayStation 1 or something, that's kind of what it reminds me of. Like
Yeah.
people's faces are weird and
But artistically, that's
distorted.
the route they took. It wasn't because they had like poor graphics.
Yeah.
Right,
But
right.
it totally
Yeah.
falls into the surrealism, so it doesn't really detract at all from anything, strangely enough.
But you didn't mean Jim Henson because Jim Henson died in the late '80s or in the
It's
'80s.
Jim Henson Studios.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that should have
I
clarified.
Henson
see.
Studios, yeah. No, and I see what you're talking about, the really dark turn it takes. It's kind of like coming into terms with, is she going to be the rebellious girl that just says, like, screw everything and ruins her family's lives, ruins the circus? Or is she going to triumph and be the good little girl?
Yeah, for me, the terror always came in the idea of something taking over
Mm-hmm.
you, and nobody else would know except you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they almost play it up as, yeah, it's not so much a choice that she's making to be good or bad. It's
Well,
like there's this evil spirit within her that sometimes comes out.
exactly.
And now that her mom's dying, it's getting like more power.
Like I first read Coraline when I was like 9 or 10, and for me that was the most terrifying thing. This same kind of parallel concept of another world that she falls into, and this fake family that lives in this other world that mirrors hers wants her to stay, and the idea that the people that love you most, who see you every day, who care about you, and you hope that they'd miss you, don't notice when something goes so completely horribly wrong. Like
Mm.
that always freaked me out as a kid, and I guess seeing that again in this movie still resonated with me. Like the idea of being replaced and no one would know, and they'd just be like okay with it, and it's like,
Kendra, have you seen a movie called Low? L-O?
I don't think so.
You would probably really like that.
Probably.
Um,
That's your recommendations.
Low.
it's about a guy who goes to hell looking for his lover, and this demon is kind of taunting him, and like, the demon's like, oh, I'll take you to your lover, but you have to like answer these questions and all this stuff, and it's personal questions of like things about his lover, and if you really knew the darkness in her, would you still want to save her?
Oh.
And it's really good.
It says comedy horror musical. There's music in it. They're singing.
Yeah, actually, yeah, it is kind of a musical. I totally forgot about the music until you just mentioned it. The whole thing is kind of like a theater production. Like the movie looks like a theater
Oh, kind of like
production.
the Devil's
Like it's on a
Circus
stage.
one that you.
Yeah. Oh man, I love these kind of movies, Kenda. The Devil's Carnival. Devil's
Carnival.
Devil's Carnival definitely had a better budget than Low did, but I feel like Low's probably a better movie.
Wow, these are like things I have never even heard of.
Devil's Carnival is insanity.
Is
I
it-
love it.
It's also a musical, horror musical.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's very, very like Repo, kind of. Like Repo the Genetic Rock Opera.
Right.
I still need.
It's very like tacky and loud and gaudy, but fabulous.
But low is like that, or the
Low,
Devil's-
no. Low is more like watching just like a play.
Interesting.
But it's really good. It's got a really good story. It's got a lot of those like moral dilemmas and getting to really know the darker side of a person. No, Low, I really like that one. That was one of
Wow.
those random clicks I did one day on Netflix, and I'm like, this movie's amazing.
Like, woohoo!
So Mirror Mask, Low, and Devil's Carnival, all of them are worth seeing.
I feel like
Mirror
you'll
Mask
struggle
and
with
Low.
Devil's Carnival, Noel, but
Yeah, Devil's
What?
Carnival, you have to be into that type. Like, I recommended it to Kenda because I know she likes that dark carnival.
and I'm just weird.
And
Yeah.
you did like it, Kenda?
I did. It was
Devil's
like really sad and really funny at the same time because it's not even trying to be anything serious. So it's
The best thing I can compare it to is Repo because it's not serious, but it's dark.
so satirical and interesting and fascinating, and it is like a shoestring budget kind of thing. And I think it's like maybe 50 minutes, 60 minutes.
It's not very long. It's gorgeous though, even with like a ridiculous budget. They did
It
an
almost
amazing
looks like
job.
it was meant to be a play, and they just prolonged it a little bit and filmed it.
It's
And
actually just according to IMDb, it's called Alleluia, the Devil's Carnival.
that would make sense because I
wouldn't
think that's
doubt
part
it.
of the song that they
'Cause-
sing.
Because there's another one called wait a minute. There's another one called The Devil's Carnival that's also a horror musical. How can there
Oh,
be two films called The Devil's Carnival that are both horror
it's
musicals?
part of the
Unless,
satire, and I'll just accept it.
oh no, it's the same movie, but it's just a different title.
Oh,
Sorry.
is it?
Yeah, I think.
Like you feel like that'd be such a niche genre, but apparently,
No, it's the same film. It's just got two slightly different titles, and but one
No,
says
I feel like
2012 and one
Hallelujah
thing.
is a sequel.
oh, what?
Yeah,
Oh,
because I don't know these characters.
yeah, because
but
one's
this is totally the same movie.
2015 and one's
Yeah. Oh
2012.
my goodness, there's a sequel. What?
We need to watch this.
Yeah, it's a sequel. This movie was phenomenal, definitely worth the wait. So I guess people were waiting.
That would be a cool little spin-off, like for us to talk about, as if we watched both of them again and talked about the weird metaphors and satire that was
Oh,
in
I
there.
love that movie.
Because they're pretty weird and
Even if
pretty
it's just
interesting.
you and me, Kenda, we'll
Yeah.
do it.
It sounds amazing. It's got like it's got a 7.7 on IMDb. That is really high.
Oh
Just like
wow.
go in
Yeah.
no expectations and just you'll be weirded out and amazed at the same time.
Well, this isn't. This is great. I wonder if these are. It sounds like it was adapted from stage, but who knows? You know, it's impossible to tell.
I mean, it definitely feels like a play too. Probably was. And the only reason why I originally watched it is because it has Sean Patrick Flannery, and I love that guy. He's from Boondock Saints, and he's the old Indiana Jones from the TV show. And I'm like, oh, I love Sean Patrick Flannery.
He's in the. I think he's in the sequel as well. But
Sweet.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That I recognize
Gives us a
him.
reason to watch the sequel.
Interesting.
And he actually has a really good singing voice too. Didn't know that until I watched the movie.
He's older than me, but he looks younger, of course. At least the picture is, but who knows? Anyway.
I think it's your turn, Noel.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I had a companion piece to the Changeling, and it's called Audrey Rose from 1977. This is directed by Robert Wise, who, I mean, these are, again, big actors, big director, big budget.
Ooh, I like its poster. I just
That's a
looked it up.
weird poster. I don't even think I've even seen that before. I remember ads for it when I was
I'm
younger.
seeing the flame one.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
there's
it's
also a
weird.
girl pressed up against a wall. I don't care about that one.
Well, that was the one that I remember. It's pretty.
Anthony Hopkins.
Yes. See, this is the thing. It's
He's young.
there was after The Exorcist. There was a cycle of possession movies, children being possessed, and then there was the whole Damien thing. There was children who were Satan, or Rosemary's Baby.
The Good Child or whatever.
Yeah. Well,
Good Son.
yeah. And then there was a small cycle of reincarnation movies that became trendy for a while, and this was the biggest budget reincarnation movie out there at the time, or probably that's ever been made. I don't know, but I mean, Anthony Hopkins wasn't a star then, but he has a major role. Marsha Mason plays the mother of Audrey Rose. Marsha Mason is the wife of Neil Simon, and she was well known at that time for sort of comedies, but she always cries a lot. And there's a great SCTV, Andrea Martin on SCTV. They did a whole Neil Simon thing, and Andrea Martin is crying the whole time, like as Marsha Mason. Anyway, I'll stick that in here when I edit it. You can see an image from that. This is way before you guys' time, but basically Marsha Mason cries through this whole movie.
Maybe that's just what she's really good at.
She was really good at it, and but she's
like Jennifer Carpenter.
she's the Jennifer Carpenter of the 70s.
Yeah.
That's right. And she was just as disliked, I think, in some ways. It's a New York family with a young daughter, and they got this actress who looks like an adult. I mean, I don't think the actress went on to do anything, but very much.
The little girl.
Yeah, she's really interesting, the little girl. But what happens is that Anthony Hopkins. We find out that Anthony Hopkins, another horrible car accident where a man loses his wife and child. This car accident is even more horrifying than the one in The Changeling, but we don't see it at the beginning. And Anthony Hopkins, for some reason, knows that Marsha Mason's daughter is his daughter who died a few years previously, is the reincarnation, and it's not really explained that well. And Anthony Hopkins, he does a strange accent. I'm not sure what he's doing. Like with Anthony Hopkins, I can't tell if he's good, and I don't fully understand everything he's doing as an actor, or if he's just all over the place. Like I'm confused.
Oh my god, I feel the
Anthony
same way about him.
What?
About you.
I feel the same way about him.
Oh, really?
Like everybody is always going on about how great he is, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know what he's going
Yeah,
for right here.
yes. Okay, good. So I'm not crazy. This is a perfect example of Anthony Hopkins. Like, is what he's doing right now really subtle and layered, and I'm not catching all of the, or is he just bonkers crazy? I wasn't sure. Like, it wasn't over the top or anything. It wasn't like Hannibal Lecter or anything like that. It was very quiet and subtle, but I couldn't really tell what was going on with him, or even what his accent was. So what happens is that it's very fascinating, and again, high budget, big cast, and horror movie. You know, I guess Reincarnation is a horror movie. They turned this into a horror movie. But the movie's really about the relationship between Marsha Mason's character and Anthony Hopkins. And Anthony Hopkins is doing like super low key kind of mumbling, and Marsha Mason's crying and crying and crying. And it goes back and forth between the two of them. But they're both really skilled, and the development of their relationship is very interesting. But basically, the family's creeped out because this Anthony Hopkins character is like skulking around, basically stalking them. And he tries to convince them that their daughter is his dead daughter reincarnated. I mean, how do you? And I have to give him credit. He's pretty convincing, although the film sticks with realism that the family, Marsha Mason and her husband, there's no way they're gonna like buy into it, no matter how convincing he is. You know what I mean? Nobody would. So this incredible thing happens. I was really into it. I was really gripped. And I thought, where can this possibly go? They're at this stalemate. And then Anthony Hopkins takes the daughter upstairs, and we find out that Anthony Hopkins has been renting an apartment upstairs. I mean, he's a real creepy stalker. He takes the daughter upstairs. She's having a fit, and he's the only one that can help their daughter with her fits. They're supposed to be psychological, but of course they're related to reincarnation. And he simply takes her up like 2 flights, and they sue him for kidnapping, which would totally happen. That's like totally realistic, right? Even though he took her behind closed doors, because he's able to talk her down. The next, there's a slam cut, or whatever they call it, to a courtroom. And I thought, wait a minute, what? They go to a courtroom, and they got this actor who plays every Jewish attorney ever in every movie ever, and he gets up and says to the jury, my client is going to convince you that this couple's daughter is his daughter reincarnated. Right in the middle of the movie. I said, oh my God. I turned it off. I thought, this is terrible.
I really, really liked your accent you just did. That was amazing.
Well, really? Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, coming from New York Jews, I mean, this guy, it was the most, I mean, they couldn't even, I mean, they got the worst voice to even say that. And then, well, I watched a little bit further, and their first witness was this Indian with like saffron robes and he gets up there, oh my God, he gets on the witness stand, and he goes, I don't think I could do this accent very well, but he's like, we are not afraid of death. We accept, 50 million people in India. We accept death because we believe in reincarnation. And I was like, oh my God, this is a training. This is like a propaganda film for I'm forgetting the religion name, and I'm looking like an idiot.
Reincarnation,
but India, what they are in India.
Hinduism?
Yeah, for Hinduism.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I turned it off. I was like, this is beyond ridiculous. They dropped all the balls. And then I turned it on a little bit later. I turned it back on and picked up where it left off. And then it got really interesting again. So it's like a film of two halves where it's like really interesting. It goes to a crazy, ridiculous place. And then it kind of builds back up from that ridiculous place. And the end actually ends up being really distressing and upsetting. And I think they didn't do that transition quite right because that courtroom scene is ridiculous. But the film has enough integrity, and the acting is good enough, and all those things that I was saying before. And the actress who plays the young girl is really good, and it ends up being this terrible tragedy that's really, if The Exorcist and The Omen are demonizing children, this one demonizes parents. So it was and I love films that demonize parents, that show how horrible parents are. I just have a thing for it. So it ends up being quite interesting. And again, it's one of the last examples of sort of big budget studio horror movies. If you call, I guess, Reincarnation, I don't know, would you call, if the reincarnation is going badly, then it's a horror film. And in this case, it's going really badly because the girl is being tormented somehow by her. So yeah, it's interesting and worth seeing. And Anthony Hopkins early in his career doing something, again, like Monica said, we're not quite sure what he's doing, but I think it's good. I'm pretty sure it's good. And
That's
yeah,
I
anyway.
have two things about the movie you just said. One with Anthony Hopkins. There's a movie I watched him in recently, called The Right, and it was actually a pretty okay movie. Um, but
R-I-T-E, a horror
yeah,
thing.
RITE. It's about like exorcisms, and
Oh,
he plays a Welsh priest. And the funny thing is like the whole movie, I could not buy him as a Welsh priest, and Anthony Hopkins is
is
Welsh.
Welsh, yeah. And I think that was
Yeah,
the accent
he
he was
is.
doing, and it's a
But
weird
in this
accent.
movie, he's playing a Welsh priest, and I'm like, I'm not buying it.
Yeah, I
Like for some
heard
odd reason, I just don't feel it. He just
Hannibal
can't.
Lecter changed everything. He turned into a cartoon. I'm sorry, but his early
Uh,
performances are not like that.
and then there's another movie. It's not a horror film. It's actually, I guess I don't know what it is. It's a rom-sci-com. I don't know. It's a sci-fi movie, called I Origins, and it's about reincarnation, and it's pretty interesting. You should check it out.
Oh, okay. I've heard of it,
It's
but
yeah, it takes a lot of turns you don't expect, and it's pretty. I don't know. I didn't know anything about it. I went into it completely blind. I was like, oh, this movie's got Stephen Yeun in it. Click.
Stephen
But
who?
Ewan. He's from The Walking Dead.
You know every actor ever, or at least everybody alive now.
But yeah, like because I have the HBO now, and I just saw it, and I was like, oh, I Origins, what's that? And I just saw his name. I'm like, all right, click, and then it was awesome.
Oh, really? Okay, I
Yeah,
definitely have heard of it. And I have to say, Audrey Rose takes some unexpected turns. But the craftsmanship of it is so strong that I really think it's worth seeing what a big budget horror movie from
I
that
kind of
era
want to
looks
watch it
like.
just to see that woman that cries the whole time.
Well, she doesn't. I'm exaggerating, but as you're watching it, you will imagine that she could be crying the whole time. But the whole thing is that the husband, is like, this is bogus, this is bullshit, and it's very realistic about could somebody be persuasive enough to convince two people, because something starts to go wrong, terribly wrong with the daughter, and then it becomes like maybe he's right.
That's actually something that I Origins deals
Oh,
with. It's
really?
not. It's more of a, well, basically somebody takes his kid in for autism, like they say they're testing him for autism, and all they're doing is showing him pictures and see how he reacts to it, and then they realize that all the pictures, like so the pictures that the kid reacted to, correlate with one another, as in they're all
Mm.
from the same place,
Mm.
and then it's all from like a dead guy, and so it kind of goes from
Mm. Oh,
there,
that's
and
interesting.
it's good.
That's
But
interesting.
yeah, it's a lot of the questions and proving, and it's more of the proving than it is the haunting part of it, which is
Mm.
why it's not really a horror film. but
This
it's
this
definitely
needed
interesting.
more proving and less haunting because Anthony Hopkins' character never explains how to solve it. That's the problem. It's like, okay, if they believed you, what now? Like that's a big plot hole in the movie, but it definitely deals with the clash, similarly to what you're describing, the clash between psychology and hard science and more, you know, transcend, you know, and it is in some ways a recruiting tool, not a recruiting tool, but it definitely does have a propaganda of the belief, you know, of propaganda for Hinduism, which is extraordinary, you know. But it is a big, it does end up being a real criticism of American Western sort of our inability to imagine something more cyclical and something more cosmic. And Anthony Hopkins' character spends time in India and ends up there, and he plays he plays the idea of a European man or Welsh or whatever, and his life being changed by spending time in India and learning these new cosmic, you know, systems or worldviews.
Oh wow,
That
yeah.
part of his performance is amazing. Anthony Hopkins nails that. It's incredible. Anyway, so that's two high budget. You know, this is the Hollywood system trying to do horror films, you know, high tony horror films for Ma and Pa, you know, for the serious film goer. And I don't know, you can decide for yourself whether they work or what effect it had, or should we go back to that, or I don't know. It's hard to say, you know. But it's definitely as far away from horror sleaze as you can possibly get, even though you could say that there's exploitation in both of them. And what happens to the child in Audrey Rose it is a child in peril movie, and those always verge on exploitation. So yeah. Anyway,
What do you mean by virgin exploitation? Like,
verge on
oh, because I was
exploitation.
like, huh, that's an interesting term. Like,
See, as soon as you said that, I immediately thought The Exorcist with the
Yeah. Oh,
crucifix. I'm like,
totally.
oh, great.
That's virgin. Oh,
because I've
God.
heard you rant about The Exorcist before, and we've had a lot of discussions about it.
Rant?
So I thought you were like, yeah, but I like your rants.
No, I love The Exorcist. It's like that changed my life.
Yeah, so I thought you were kind of like tying in with that because we've discussed how it's similar to a metaphor for puberty and stuff.
Right,
So
right,
when
right.
I thought you said virgin, then I was like,
It
huh,
does make
and like thought
sense.
way too much about it for a second.
Well, the
Me and
girl
Kinda
is
immediately
essentially the
went to
same age.
Exorcist.
What?
Me and Kinda immediately both went to Exorcist. I like it.
Well, it's essentially they're playing off of many tropes from The Exorcist, but absolutely a child possessed, a child in peril. It just ends up being that it's essentially the parents have screwed up their inability to get their shit together.
Also like The Exorcist.
Huh?
I said also like The Exorcist.
Well, that's my interpretation of The Exorcist, but most people don't agree. That I think that yeah, I think The Exorcist is about terrible parenting or really
A
mean.
lot of a lot of horror films tend to be about like parents in
Yeah.
general. I mean, when you look at Amityville at the same time, they were going through the
I haven't seen that in so
bankruptcy,
long.
Yeah,
and
and
in Amityville especially because the possession comes over him, he starts becoming an abusive father. Like he wasn't abusive; they
Oh,
just had money problems, but the possession
Shining.
makes him abusive. Shining.
oh,
A lot of movies
Shining.
deal. I think it's. I mean, especially when it's horror dealing with children. Children are supposed to be able to rely on their parents, and when
Yeah,
their parents are the scary thing, that's
yeah.
even more terrifying to a child.
That's
Yeah,
interesting. And the
it's
American family. I mean, The Exorcist, she's a divorced mother, and there's a scene where she's screaming at the father for not being there for his daughter. So, I mean, yeah, all of this family breakdown stuff for sure goes on through a lot of these films. That's right. That's interesting, Monica. You could trace a whole thing about the American family as represented through horror films. Well, what about Poltergeist? The poltergeist isn't really bringing anything latent out of the family there, is it? That's really about real
It has
estate.
been so long
yeah. I'd
since I've
have to
seen
watch that
Poltergeist.
again because I watched that as a kid. That scared the poop out of me, but I liked it.
I don't really remember Poltergeist that well, but I do remember that the children were more party to the horrors as
Yeah,
opposed to
for
being
sure.
scared by it.
Yeah.
So their fear of the parents aren't as necessary in that film because it's not really the children being scared, it's the parents being
Well,
scared.
that's why I didn't like that film, because that whole child in peril, it felt so cheap, because
Mhm.
it didn't, it
Because
was,
the little girl is just like, they're here, and
yeah,
like she doesn't care.
yeah.
Um,
She degaffs.
I mean, some people say it's a satire on American consumerism, that it's a lot of,
mm,
or the
Right.
television, it's coming through
Because she
the
gets eaten
television.
yeah,
television.
Yeah, so you could say
the
that.
desensitization of children
Hmm.
Yeah, or
because
that
they
the
don't care.
television is bringing stuff into your house that you can't control. I mean, you could say it that way, but I don't like that movie. You guys should watch it, though.
I feel
And
like that's such a surface.
I think it's a very surface movie, you know?
Yeah, I feel like that's such a
Is
barely
that
scratched
why it
the
was
surface.
Native Americans or like get back to the naturalistic order?
Oh no, but that happens in Poltergeist too. So I
Oh,
haven't
okay,
seen
okay.
that yet, but I've heard there's
See,
like
I haven't. It's been so long since I've seen those movies.
yeah.
Yep.
So Kenda, did you have another movie?
Um, I'm trying to come up with something. You just bringing up Amanda Seyfried, I believe the name was. Um, I'm trying to
We
remember.
already did the Moth Diary, so you can't do that.
No,
Oh no,
I
that wasn't Seyfried. That was a different
No,
model.
yeah.
That was that even freakier looking model, right? Okay.
hmm
freak-
The like Italian model or whatever
What's her
turned
name?
actress.
Lily Cole.
Yeah.
That's the one who was in the Moth Diaries. Anyway,
um, it made me think of a movie I'd seen her in that was unsettling and still fit within the category of, well, it wasn't supposed to be horror. It was just
Oh,
supposed to be
I was like Jennifer's Body.
no, no. It was called Chloe.
yeah, it's the
Yeah,
Adam McGoyan. I haven't seen it.
it
I haven't
was
seen that either.
it was weird.
I mean, the director's Adam McGoyan.
Interesting. And Liam Neeson was in it, and
Julianne Moore, right?
yeah, and the whole premise is Julianne Moore, more or less. She thinks that Liam Neeson, who's her husband, is having an affair with his young college students because he's a professor, and Amanda Seyfried is Chloe, who gets hired by his wife to try to see if she can seduce him and see if she can basically prove, yes, he is, going off and doing things with these other girls. And it kind of becomes Julianne Moore's new obsession. She
Mm.
meets up with her every weekend, okay, tell me what he said to you, how he touched you, how he
Oh,
flirted with
that
you.
does sound interesting.
And
Girl, you just need to get out of your relationship. That's all that needs to
yeah,
happen.
and it's weird because you're not sure who you're rooting for
Mm.
anymore. You could see the wife has her own problems, obviously.
Yeah.
Liam Neeson has his own problems, and you're not even sure. You're starting to hate him because you think he's being the skis ball,
Mm.
and then you're not sure how you feel yet about Amanda Seyfried either because she almost seems to welcome his advances. So you're
Mm.
wait,
Yeah.
girl, whose team are you playing for? And then it just completely does a 180, and you're wait, what? So,
Interesting.
um,
That sounds like
it,
Adam McGoyan territory. That director, I know that director's work really well. I just the later work I haven't seen as much of. I think this is the
Wow, I
first thing he
like that
didn't
his
write.
name is spelled Atom.
Yeah.
I totally want to name my child that now.
it's
Well,
pretty sweet.
his
I'm sure
sister, they
more
named.
Monica.
He grew up near a nuclear reactor in Canada or something. Yeah, that's why and the sister's name is Eve, so that it was like a joke, Adam and Eve. But
That's cute.
yeah,
That's pretty
so
cool.
you would recommend it, Kinda?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember if I remember walking away going what? More than thinking
I like those movies.
more
Yeah.
than thinking this was a solid, well put together movie.
Mm,
You definitely walk away uncomfortable
mm.
and unsettled, and I'm not sure it was badly done. I feel like there were some things that probably could have been tweaked, but it was still enjoyable and completely different than what I went in expecting, so I enjoyed that part of it.
Well, I like those two women. I like Adam McGoyan. I don't like Liam Neeson, but I should watch it. There's no reason for me because you describing it makes it sound a lot more interesting. I'm sorry, I don't
No,
think he's
no,
very
it's
good.
okay.
Is that
Uh,
what are you doing a Liam Neeson movement there, Monica? Is that what that
It's
is?
I am in love with his voice.
Yeah.
I could just listen to him talk
Yeah, he's got a nice
forever.
voice.
Okay, so my other one that is in the vein of,
Oh,
actually, it's really funny because one's called The Experiment, the first one I recommended. The second one I recommended, Experimenter.
Oh.
oh, you
Uh,
saw that with Peter
yeah,
Sarsgaard?
you have Peter
He's my
Sarsgaard.
sooner dreamboat lover boy, you know.
I love him
My
too.
life, I structured my life around Peter Sarsgaard for a short time. I'll tell you about it another time.
For the longest time, I didn't know who he was, but I called him the poor man's Ewan McGregor.
Oh God, how dare you? It's the other way around. No, I like Ewan McGregor too. And they do
I
have
love,
similar.
I love both of them.
Yeah, I have to say I do
No,
too, but
Experimenter is super good, and
I've
I
heard
had
it's
the page up,
amazing.
and I had the YouTube, or I had a page up, and now I can't find it. It was the Yale obedience experiment. I'm trying to find it right
It's
now
the
because I had
other
it up.
famous
So,
behavioral, yeah.
Milgram experiment. It was the
Yeah,
Milgram
Stanley
experiment,
Milgram, yeah.
and it's basically saying how the whole point of the experiment is to see how something like um, the Hitler regime could happen.
Ah.
Basically, Milgram had family who was from Germany, and they were Jewish, and they fled away, but he constantly always wondered, what if they hadn't? And as a psychologist, he just kept dwelling on this and created a obedience experiment where one you have two participants, one's an actor and one knows nothing about anything. The actor, they say that you all draw a card, and one's going to be the teacher and one's going to be the learner, but it's rigged so the actor is always the learner and the person who's actually in the experiment is the teacher. And so they put the learner in a separate room where he gets administered shocks every time he gets a question wrong. And then the teacher asks the questions and shocks him. And each time he gets a question wrong, they're upping the ampage to how much he gets shocked because they're saying
They're
that the
saying they're
experiment,
doing that,
they're
but
saying it's like a Skinner experiment of negative reinforcement to enforce learning, but really they're testing the person who's teaching to see if he will continue electrocuting a person even when the person in the other room is screaming and crying just because he's told to.
it's all about,
And
yeah.
and in the original experiment, when it was being proposed to all the psychology boards and all that stuff, and it took a long time to get the experiment done because everybody basically laughed him out of the room and said no one's going to push the second button. Everyone will get up and leave.
Nope.
And when he did the experiment, I think he did it for, I can't remember how long it was. He did it for a couple of years, several different campuses, several different areas. His original goal, okay, his original thought process was he was going to do it in America and then he was going to do it in Europe. And he was expecting America, everyone to say no, because that's
Mm,
the American ideal.
right. Particularly at
Is
that
to rise
time,
up,
post World War
have your own
II.
personal freedom,
Right.
all that. And in Europe, he was expecting, because they've come from dictatorships where you don't have choices and everything, for them to be the ones that push all the buttons. It never made it to Europe because it didn't need to, because out of all the experiments, I think he tested some 1,000 people. I think it was only like 4 or 5 didn't complete the experiment. Everyone else went all the way through to the point of where the actor learner stopped responding. Like he would be screaming, saying, let me out. And then he would go silent. And they were still
Ooh.
pushing.
So the other
Um,
reason I haven't watched that movie because I don't want to have to witness it, but
it's
I've heard it's
and
really
oh my
good.
goodness, I love too because they do show the moment when the first person they have says no, and the guy that they got to play him is a guy that I am absolutely in love
Oh,
with.
another actor. Who is
And
it?
I don't know how to say his last name, but I love this guy. It's Anton
Hmm.
Yelchin. I don't know. He's Chekhov in the new Star Trek. He's in oh, what's that movie I keep telling you to watch? Odd
He's
Thomas. He's the main guy in Odd Thomas. He's just the most adorable man ever created. He's so cute. And he plays the first person to say no to the experiments, and the first person that said no was actually an electrician. and he actually knew basically
Oh.
the voltage. He knew what happens to a person. And I think after like the fourth one, he was like, I know exactly what 45 volts feels like. I'm
Mm.
an American citizen, and you cannot tell me to keep going. And he
Mm.
just got up and walked away. And it, it was just the most moving thing after watching all
Wow.
those people like keep pushing the buttons to have someone just stand up and say no. I'm like, I almost started crying.
Wow.
And the thing is like everyone says like they even make a point in the movie that, and even when I was watching it, I'm going, yeah, I wouldn't do that. I would totally get up and walk away. And in the movie, it's like everyone in the movie says like, oh, I would totally get up and walk away, but they're actually in that situation. And it's really scary, and it's a perfect explanation of how something like the concentration camps can happen. And as soon as you take away personal responsibility, and it's the responsibility of your boss,
Yeah.
as soon as you start saying, I'm sorry, I'm only doing my job, that's when scary stuff starts happening.
That's definitely
And
horror.
yeah, it was. I mean, it's technically like a psychological psychology movie, but it's really scary. And the whole time I was watching it, I just had like this gut feeling in my stomach. And we studied this in school too, but there's not as much footage on that one,
I
so I
think there's
never really
audio of
saw it.
it. I think there's
Yeah,
audio,
there's the
I've heard.
audio of the dude, because they it was a pre-recording. The dude that was screaming, because he just would sit in the room and do nothing and have the pre-recording of him screaming.
Oh.
And there is audio, but in my class we didn't watch it as much. We just read that one. So actually sitting there watching the experiments happen, even though it wasn't the real thing, it was just the
Wow.
movie. Like I just had this insane feeling in my gut where it was hard to watch, and it
I
was just
bet.
something so simple as a little experiment. But again, it shows how easy it is for people to get dark.
Well, I've heard that it's got all kinds of weird meta stuff going on, that there's all kinds of non-realistic, a lot of talking to the camera and like
Yeah, they break the
reenactments
third
and
wall. It's almost as if
there's
it's
like
almost as if
projections and stuff.
Milgram is kind of making his own memoir.
Mm. And I've
Like
heard
it's
Peter's
almost as
really
if like
good.
after he died, he's telling the world about his own
Oh,
experience
that.
after his death.
Oh,
But yeah,
interesting.
there's a lot of like where they'll be driving in the car, and it's very obviously a projection, but
Yeah,
it's
right.
just kind of to give you that feeling of the original. I don't know. It's really good though.
Yeah.
And Peter Skarsgård is really good at playing that
No,
character throughout.
Sarsgaard.
Sar-
Sarsgaard. Don't make
Skarsgård. I
that.
want to say Skarsgård
Everybody
because
makes that mistake.
well,
But
it's
as
because
a
of my
Sarsgaardian myself, I have to correct
well,
everybody.
it's because my beautiful
I
Alexander
know, I
Skarsgård.
know, I know. He's yeah. Do you want to do a recapitulation? You always do that, Monica. You're really good at that. So
Oh,
you
I
didn't
wasn't
write it
writing
down
them
this
down this
time.
time, but
So
we had Mirror Mask. We had what was your second one, Kinda?
Chloe.
Chloe, right?
Chloe. We had oh, I wrote yours down. No, because I'm gonna watch them.
Yeah,
The
no.
Changeling and Audrey Rose, and then we had Experimenter and the Experiment.
Yeah.
You want to watch those? I can't vouch for all of them, but
Should be good.
I like this. It is an interesting place to go. Horror that's not officially horror, but is still horrifying.
you wouldn't find it in the horror section.
Yeah, yeah. It's very interesting.
Thanks for watching.
Tell us your fears at gmail.com.
Gmail.com.
Okay.
We'll put links, like and subscribe these
All right.
directions here. All right.
All right.
Thanks for watching.